First thing I'd like to notice is what is your benefit of listening to me? What's the point? I mean, socioeconomic protests, communism, I mean, what is he talking about? Of all the presentations, of all the talks that we've listened so far, we haven't seen a single person having a full database of protests in Kazakhstan since 1992 until 2009. So we've been all hypothesizing, saying that, well, there were lots of protests in the beginning of 1990s. Yes, it's a common sense, but can you really empirically show this? And can you really say that protest is somehow affected by the government's expenditures in the social sector? This is exactly the question. This is the relationship that I'm trying to explore in this talk. So this very statement in italics, communism is dead, live with it. It reflects the government's main rhetoric, okay, the message that it's sending towards its public, the citizens. It's saying that, well, forget about the communism, forget about the Soviet welfare system, let's just do away with it, okay? We must move on forward. We must live a better life. We must, establish new goals and priorities. What are these goals? What are these priorities? And how did the citizens buy this argument? Did the people really buy this argument? Were they really persuaded by this that the future Kazakhstan is better than the past Kazakhstan, the past Soviet Kazakhstan? This is another question which I was asking my interviewees. And the socioeconomic protest, I just want to define why I'm looking only at socioeconomic protest. Actually, since this is based on my doctoral research, I had my full research was on protest mobilization in Kazakhstan in general. But since this conference is about welfare state and its relation to collective action, I decided to focus only one, the most popular, the most systematic form of protest, which is the socioeconomic protest. What is a socioeconomic protest? It is the one which is related to welfare issues, such as low pensions, wage arrears, in-kind benefits, in-cash benefits. I mean, all the sort of compensations that people are claiming from the government. These are the sort of things that people usually protest about when we are talking about socioeconomic protest. So. In 2012, our President Nazarbayev, he announced this concept of the Society of Universal Labor. What is this? Okay. This was actually voiced by him in the Accorda meeting with the minister, with the government, and he published this article in the Kazakhstanskaya Pravda newspaper. He is trying to define a problem. What is the problem that the world is facing today? There is enormous consumerism, which gave birth to wide-scale social sponging, which is parasitism. In Russian, it sounds like иждивенчество. I mean, people are extremely dependent on the governments. And this, even in industrial states, has become one of the causes of the global crisis. Okay, let's move on. Major barrier to social modernization in Kazakhstan, according to our president, is a phenomenon called social infantilism, inherited from the Soviet past. In other words, people are expecting the government to help them. If their flat had burned down, they're expecting the Akimat to give them a new flat. I mean, come on, grow up. Okay, this is the message that the government is sending people. Stop being so childish. No one's going to help you. Okay, we're not going to waste our already, very tight budget on such things as, buying you a spare livestock which, died in a flood somewhere in Talgar or Kazalagash. Okay, we got to move on, and you have to take care of it yourself. Okay, don't beg for, with the government for money. Insure your property. Go to private businesses, okay? Ask them to help you. Move on. We must cultivate a belief in the society that state is not an infinite donor, but a partner who creates conditions for citizens improving the welfare. I mean, if you work hard, then you will be rewarded for that. Okay? We will not reward you for just, working and doing nothing. State social support is provided to the recipients to motivate them for labor, creative and public activities. Yes, the state will continue to help the needy, but things that individuals can do themselves, they should and they must do it themselves. Okay? Don't hope that one day the government will come and help you as it did, in the past. Forget about it. And here is the famous quote by John F. Kennedy. made during his inauguration, asked not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your government. Okay, this is one of the solutions to the social, For your country. Yeah. For your government. Okay. This is one of the solutions to the problem of social infantilism. Okay, to get rid of all these parasites, who expect the government to be helping them all the time and always. So the objective, like I said before, is to explore this major relationship between the government spending into welfare and the variance of protest mobilization in Kazakhstan exactly in this period, because this is the period which I have data for. Let's just quickly, go through some basic definitions. I guess there is no point in defining what a protest is. Famous collective action scholar, German scholar Opp, he basically defined this, what a protest is. It's a collectivity of individuals who are aggrieved by something. They, go onto streets in order to protest about this. Socioeconomic protests, like I said before, they are related to public's standard of living, such as healthcare provision, quality of education, payment of social benefits. I mean, this is the sort of protest that I will be looking at today. And how are they connected? How are they influenced by the government spending in the social sector? Finally, social welfare spending. Now, this is a very problematic topic because lots of scholars have been, debating this. How do you exactly measure social welfare spending? OECD countries, they have a very good database. It's called Social Expenditures Index. Okay, they basically list a very simple, very informative piece of data and very comfortable to use it. But speaking of Kazakhstan, I mean, what is welfare to somebody is ill-fare to another person. Okay, and I'm not mentioning issues of conceptualization, the methodological issues related to questions of measuring welfare. It's different. What I'm looking at, two basic things, or how I'm looking at them, is the effort. The government's spending effort is measured by the spending in health, education, and social protection. These three sectors are defined to be the three main things that influence the standard of living. Second is the outcomes, the spending outcomes. How do you see if these efforts do actually work anything? And the outcome, the welfare spending outcome, is measured by the social progress indicators. And there are dozens of them. Human Development Index is one of them. Okay, statistics provided by the Agency of Statistics on the infant mortality rate, unemployment rate, poverty headcount ratio. Okay, these are the outcomes. Okay, keep this in mind. So the rationale. Why am I doing this research? What's the whole point of writing this paper? The first reason is there is a huge, there is a big lack of literature, scholarly literature, on the relationship between social welfare and protest mobilization in Kazakhstan. Yes, there will be some future papers based on what I've heard today. I mean, some people are working in such issues as, the influence of pension reform on protest mobilization, the influence of, these women's, maternity leave compensations on the protest mobilization. Yes, these are very, remote and isolated cases. But what about, the greater picture, the overall picture? Okay, such initiative hasn't been made by no one before. So I'm trying to fill that gap here. Another second rationale here, and this is very interesting here, I'd like to draw your attention to this. There is a big misconception. People think that people in Kazakhstan, are very passive. Okay, they're very inert. They will do whatever the government will tell them to do. Yes, to a certain extent. Not only until one day when you attack one's, material interests or economic interests. These are the things which we call as we have nothing to lose frame. This is the most widespread frame that, drives people to protest. Because they have nothing to lose, basically, literally. All the pensioners, all the workers, the miners who protested in Kazakhstan in the beginning of 1990s, they literally had nothing to lose, but their chains, but their frustration. Okay? So this major frame, collective action frame, this major rationale, okay, is very underestimated here in Kazakhstan. Yes, people say people are afraid of protesting. Yes, people are. But people whom I interviewed, they tell me that, look, if you take away my property, if you take away my right-hand side vehicle, which I imported from Japan some 2 years ago, remember this thing, sometime in 2008 or something? People will go onto the streets. That's what they did. middle class, working class people, they joined this collective effort in order to protest against the government's ban on the exploitation of right-hand side vehicles in Kazakhstan. So it worked. Maternity leave things, it worked, right? Didn't it? This pension age thing, it worked. But why did it work? Because people mobilized. Because it really worked. Okay? But it will not work for things such as freedom of speech for Kazakhstan, free and fair elections, okay? Freedom to Vladimir Kozlov. This will not work. Who is Vladimir Kozlov? You think people living in suburbs of Kozlov don't know him? Come on. So please grow up, and no one will care about democracy. No one will care about environment, okay? But things related to the people's, shirt, things related to the people's stomach, they do mobilize people. Next, this is basically, the major promise of the relative deprivation theory. Okay, very underestimated theory once again, because modern day social movement literature is focusing on, these very fancy new social movement theories or urban rights movements, okay? But this very theory is usually being underestimated. Of course, there are problems with this theory, and I must take them into account. But at least, for the sake of this presentation, this theory is working really, really well. These are the data and the methods that I used. Initially, I had 12 cases. 12 organizations which mobilized people for protest. 4 per each issue. Political issue, socio-economic issue, environmental issue, and interethnic issues. But since this presentation is only talking about social welfare and social benefits, I will be focusing on 4 major cases, which are the workers' movement, the future Profsoyuz, okay, the miners, Karaganda miners, who protested back in 1989, who boast by saying that Nazarbayev came to us, he was nobody. We didn't actually, consider him seriously, but look at him today. I mean, these are the things that the interviewee told me. Поколение movement, again, was mentioned yesterday. People, Irina Sagostina, who is standing up for the pensioners' rights. Shanrak Republican Public Association, which was very active in the Shanrak riots back in 2006. It was later on headed by, it is still headed by NIYAZBEKOV. And finally, the Talmas movement, the notoriously famous or infamous Aynur Kurmanov. I don't know where he is right now. I don't think he's in jail. I think he just left Kazakhstan. Okay, he's in Moscow. Okay, so you see, all the bright minds, the future of Kazakh opposition is either in the grave, in prison, in a mental institution, or abroad. My protest database, okay. How did I compile my database of protests? I literally went to the National Library of Kazakhstan here in Almaty. I asked the librarian, I visited them for 3 consecutive months, looking through these 5 newspapers. Bir Yasu, Karavan Blitz, Vremya, and Svoboda Slova. These are the oppositional Republican newspapers that criticized the government, that publicized protests around the country. I literally counted, okay, the protests which they were covering. I was also paying attention to how many people were there, what was the issue, were there any casualties, where did it take place, when did it take place. Okay, so in the end there were 695 protests in the period between January 1992 and December 2009. Evolution of social welfare, I think you're all experts. You wouldn't find anything new here. This slide is basically, surveying or overviewing, the collapse of the Soviet Union, the Soviet cradle-to-grave welfarism, and then the international aid that Kazakhstan has been receiving, policy of estrangement, economic liberalization, introduction of tenge, foreign direct investments, and a very important thing, the targeted social assistance scheme is the social benefits program that has been announced in Kazakhstan at the recommendation of many international organizations as a program which will substitute the Soviet, welfare system. This graph is very important here. It basically discusses the expenditures, the government's expenditures into 3 major sectors of social welfare: health, education, and social protection. As you can see here, the spending has been going down since since the middle of 1990s. That's when the government introduced the policy of retrenchment. We must save money, okay? We must spend it wisely. We can't, that's when the system of in-kind benefits was replaced with in-cash benefits. This is the source where I took it from. So please pay attention to these, last few years, 2003, 4, 5, and 6. There is a steady, decline or a fluctuating line, okay, between the expenditures of the government in social welfare. However, besides that, in spite of this, we witness a growth of the Human Development Index, which is the outcome of the government's social benefit expenditures. So if the government is spending less, how come is the Human Development Index, which is an aggregate of expenditures in social benefits, blah, 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 infant mortality, and all sorts of other social indicators, how come is it going up? Okay, so this is a very interesting thing to note here. Next, and this. If you study this table very carefully, you'll see that things are really going well in Kazakhstan. They're going much better than in Russia, in Azerbaijan, and many other Central Asian countries. Actually, this government's program or objective of being one of the most competitive states, okay, is very realistic. And we have already become one of the world's 50 most competitive states, all due to these numbers. Okay, I have only 4 minutes left. And this is the interesting here thing. This is the protest that we had, the socio-economic protests in Kazakhstan. You see, the biggest spike was in 1996. There is a methodological reason to explain this as well as the practical reason. Okay, and since 2002 and 2003, we see a gradual growth of socio-economic protests. 2006, this is the Shanrak. 2008, right-hand side vehicles, ipotechniki, dolchiki. Okay, all these protests are there. Probably you were wondering, what is the proportion of political protests, environmental protests? Look at this. Political protests were rising with the introduction, with the evolution of democratic choice of Kazakhstan. Okay, the first ever opposition, the genuine opposition, which was established in 2002. Okay, so political protests were, the lion's share of protests was the political protest. But socioeconomic protests were also going up by inertia. Environmental and interethnic protests, they're almost non-existent in Kazakhstan because people do not really care about, proton rocket explosions, about, nuclear waste disposal. This is not something on the people's agenda. But socioeconomic issues are number one. And life satisfaction. Another very, straightforward information here, very obvious. In 1996, a survey conducted by International Foundation of Election Systems, they revealed that 82% of respondents were dissatisfied with their life. Skip forward, 8 years later, survey conducted by Reputatsiya think tank, they came to the conclusion that nationwide, 74% of people are satisfied with their lives. You see? So social welfare, despite severe cuts, has shown some benefits. People have seen some of the oil money, okay, in redistributive practices, in their, actually the middle class has been now, emerging in Kazakhstan, as some, scholars have said. And in 2013, Gallup Heatherwise, they've published this report, which called Kazakhstan as the 57th happiest country in the world, out of 156 states. So is it a myth then that people are unhappy with social welfare? What then, all the presentations that we've listened so far, what's the sense? What's the point that they're making? It looks like we are really happy, okay, looking at these things. But bear with me, this is the protest that used to take place in 1990s. This is the actual protest, okay? This is the extract of protest. You see, most of them are related to benefits, increase of wages, wage arrears, price speculations, the requirement to pay for a trade space, a local bazaar, something that nobody will question nowadays. Look at the first one, demand. The meat butchers in Almaty in 1992, they were demanding a barter of meat for a car at the price of 15,000 rubles. Поколение movement there, you see, pensioners, association of blinds. So these are the sort of things. And these are the typical protests that used to take place in 1990s. Okay? And these are the protests in late 2000s. Okay, look in red. The Kimep students even protested in 2007 about the rise of tuition fees. Look at Zauris Batalova is here. She used to protest back in 2008, this organization that she's heading for adequate housing, the Dostoyное жилье. They were protesting in Astana against demolitions. And then there were Aynur Kurmanov, legalization of land plots and the release of Aynur Kurmanov, the dwellers of problematic districts. Ainur Kurmanov was a sort of a Robin Hood, the representative of social justice to the people. That's why they demanded his release. So this is the nature of protest, socio-economic protest, in the end of 2000s. Okay, these are some of the photos from the protest in 2000s. Look at what the people did in Shanarak. This is one of the, dramaturgical protest strategies. They know that if they, lift the portrait of President Nazarbayev, the police will not beat them, the police will not, they are protecting themselves like this was, a mana against medieval force. So they are using the president's portrait there. So the findings, there is a negative relationship between welfare, social expenditures, and protest mobilization in Kazakhstan. In other words, the government is spending less, protests go up. This is the major conclusion of this graph, if you remember this. Right? Remember the welfare was going down, sort of, and the protests were going up. Which is, I think, a conventional wisdom. People will not sit at home when they have nothing to eat, so obviously they will go up and protest. Next, relevance of relative deprivation theory. When I talked to my interviews, all of them said that, look, we won't care about the police arrests, we won't care about, fines, we won't care about this and that, as long as, we achieve our goals. Okay? And they really wanted to achieve this goal. These дольщики, ипотечники, декретники, что там еще у нас? Пенсионники, okay? They all have some issue at stake. There was a question from a gentleman, Nurlan Nuraliyev, in the morning session, who raised this issue of Mankur Olson's collective action theory. Look, there is rational choice theory. People will always weigh the costs and the benefits of taking part in collective action. If the benefits outweigh the costs, which is potential imprisonment, people will go out the streets. Ainur Kurmanov was literally helping people how to organize protests. He told them, you need to go to Bulat Abilov, he'll give you the money. You need to go to Amirjan Kusarov, you need to write to Kazakh, he'll give you the money. Go to Alga, they have money. Go to, Svoboda Slova, okay, publish an announcement that there will be a protest next week, blah, blah, blah. It is working. Implications, this is the last slide. Social welfare indicators for Kazakhstan should be approached with caution. Okay, because on one hand it looks like there is a decrease of expenditures and people should be unhappy, but on the output side we see that people are actually happy and the Kazakhstan is doing really, really well. And this is data not provided by the national statistic agencies, but some huge organizations like World Bank. So this is a really trustworthy data. Second implication: government should not try the patience of the population by quickly responding to socioeconomic issues raised by aggrieved masses. Okay, if the government shuts its eyes at people's grievances, socioeconomic grievances, this will really, result in a Zhanaozen event. What happened in Zhanaozen? People people protested just only because of socioeconomic issues. Better, working conditions, social justice. They wanted to receive salaries similar to the salaries of foreign workers. These were the sort of things. But later on, the problem occurred when they started to politicize. This is something that you must not do in Kazakhstan. Okay, protest about whatever you want, anything you want, but don't touch the political issues. Don't touch Putin, don't touch China, don't touch Kyrgyz, Uzbeks or whatever. Okay, don't touch the president, don't touch the institutional system in Kazakhstan. If you observe these rules of the game, you will receive the permission from the local Akimat. By the way, I spent a month in the local Akimat here looking through their piles of journals they have on the decision to either approve or reject permission to hold the protest in Almaty. And most of the protests which were allowed to be held were about socioeconomic issues, cultural issues, youth against smoking, youth against AIDS, this sort of things. But things related to housing, things related to children's rights, they were never approved. Finally, government should let off steam to preserve the status quo. If the Kazakhstani government decides to actually forbid even the socio-economic protest, then there would be something that happened in Kyrgyzstan easily. Okay, because what would these people do? I mean, dekretniki, ipotechniki, if they didn't have a right to protest, if they didn't receive a permission to hold the protest? I mean, I think it would have resulted in some, underground, and it would have ended in some violence. But just because government holds these channels open, it lets off like a cattle, okay? They lift this cattle, the population, steams off some socioeconomic, and then they shut it down and people are happy. No democracy, everyone is happy, but people are protesting about socioeconomic issues. Who is to blame? The government, but not the president, right? Thank you.